You're listening to the Rite Retirement Show.
The 70% of people out there listening to the show today are going to need some level of care. It doesn't necessarily mean that 70% are going to end up in a nursing home, but 70% of people will need some assistance out there. The biggest fear is running out of money for the retiree, but what we see is not enough people spend enough of their money.
Chris prides himself in what matters to you. This is the Rite Retirement Show.
Hi there. Welcome to the Rite Retirement Show with certified financial planner and financial advisor Chris Wallace. He is president at the firm WG Financial Group, and also joining us today, Graham Bauer. He is a certified financial planner and advisor there as well. Both here again today to give us some really good advice about retirement planning. Yes, that's what we always talk about. Here's our phone number, 256-937-2010. That's how you can reach out to us for a complimentary discovery session. Call the number, or if you prefer texting, text the word visit. 256-937-2010. This is a complimentary discovery session. Check us out on Facebook too, guys. If anything happens throughout the week after our show is aired, Chris will be sure to update any news headlines that have to do with retirement planning and anything like that. He'll make sure and post something. And do remember our motto for you is to plan, retire, and play. And that's what we talk about on our show. Find us online at wgfinancialgroup.com. And this show is available on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Just search for the Rite Retirement Show. Hello, Chris and Graham. So good to be here with you today.
Hello, Luann. Great to be back with you and take back the reins from Graham a little bit. He kind of went a little crazy last week.
Man, he did great, didn't he?
Yeah, we tried to keep it professional, even though you weren't here to protect us from ourselves.
Yeah, there you go. We never said anything bad about you either, Chris.
No, I was checking in on you guys. So
we were good.
Yeah, full disclosure, I listened to the show Cutting Grass actually last week.
What?
Before it was actually
hooky.
Well, I was home actually working. I know. Let's put it this way. I had my son cutting grass. I was actually edging the yard out.
Okay.
So I listened to it prior to the release of the show, because I always listen to our show prior to it hitting the air, so I can kind of critique myself and make notes and make sure I didn't say anything goofy, which I do often, but not too goofy. And I listened to it. And to be honest with you, I finished trimming the yard and I went right inside and I told my wife, I said, Jen, Graham's show is phenomenal this week.
Oh, yay.
It's phenomenal. And I've been dethroned and all that good stuff. No, but he did an amazing job of last week's show. I thought his confidence, the way he spoke, it was great. I listened, and I know him and like him, but I listened to the show and I was like, this is good stuff. Like I know and talk to him all the time, and this is still good stuff. And so I thought it was really great.
Aww. So, Graham, aren't you glad to hear that? We had a good time, didn't we? You did great.
We had a great time, and appreciate you letting me do it. But it's good to have you back as well.
Yes, of course.
Have someone else to be bouncing off of.
Yeah, besides me.
Get back to the normal format.
Poor Graham had to do a lot of talking last week, Chris.
Well, Luann is always a pro too. Always good to have around. So
yeah.
Well,
so
thanks.
He touched on some good things last week.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he mentioned was the big, beautiful bill. And one of the things that I've had people ask me about the no tax on Social Security. And obviously in the bill, it's not in there. But what they did was they kind of slid in the larger standard deviation deduction that's there. So that increased, I think it's $4,000, that additional. And my thinking was, because we've said all along, I think even put on Facebook or something like that, our company page, that will not get passed. And I told many people, I just don't see that really getting passed. But what they did, they kind of slid in that larger standard deviation, a standard deduction. I said standard deviation.
Standard deduction, which,
I
mean,
I got numbers in the brain.
To be honest, and I think we touched on this a little bit last week, but as far as Social Security goes, with the way that it's taxed, that actually will make a bit of a difference for some people.
It'll make a difference.
Because for a married couple, they each get that standard deduction. So that's, an extra $8,000 on top of I think it's 30. So getting up to like a $38,000 standard deduction.
Big.
Is pretty
You guys
significant.
think that'll pass the Senate?
Oh man, it just remains to be seen.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
they're gonna change some things,
Yeah,
obviously.
you know they will.
But I don't think they'll mess with that. I actually think they'll.
It's kind of small in the grand scheme of all of the
Right.
other things in the bill.
Right.
Okay.
But what it does, as Graham was talking about it last week, and me putting some thinking to it, it really helps out if you're going to Roth convert, because you get a little bit more room to be able to do some of that tax planning there. So that's kind of nice. So again, I thought he did a great job last week. Graham, you have the real this week, kind of real talk. We normally try to talk about good and bad, and this week I think you've heard reels regarding a certain topic. I'll let you lead with it, but then I think you overheard someone in a coffee shop, and I'm going to let you kind of lead this discussion here.
So this is something. I don't have one specific reel about this or video online. There are a lot of videos though on it. I see it quite frequently, and I overheard in a coffee shop. It was kind of an interesting scenario. When I'm in public, we all try not to eavesdrop, but sometimes you don't have headphones on. There's a table right next to you. It's just kind of hard not to, especially when people are talking about finances, because that's kind of my area. So there was someone, I'm not sure exactly what their relationship to this person was, but it was like a young couple talking to someone who was not a financial advisor, not a real estate agent. I'm not really sure exactly who they were. But this young couple, had recently, I think, signed like a record deal or done something where they had gotten a large sum of money. And the person talking to them was encouraging them to start house hacking, which essentially the idea of that is, you buy a house with minimal amount down possible, you rent it out. And then as soon as you have any equity in that house, you take a second mortgage, extract the money out of that house, buy another house with the minimal amount down, and just kind of keep repeating that. And I know for some people, that has worked for them in the past, especially if you talk about a super low interest rate environment like 2020, 2021, where, it might have been easier to buy something with minimal amounts down and rent it for a profit. And it took everything in me not to jump into this conversation and say, you guys are just getting started. Why don't you just max out your Roth IRA first, or do something a little bit, lower in risk rather than taking on enormous amount? Why don't you put some of it towards your own house? Because I think had alluded to that they hadn't even purchased their own house yet. So, you see people talk about these things, and I'm not saying there's not a place for being a little bit more aggressive, that you can't leverage debt in a creative way depending on the rate environment. However, just for a young person starting out, or even if they were people in their early 40s, just kind of paying down some of their other debts, I just feel like it's really shaky advice, especially in this environment, just because of how hard it is to create, that good capitalization rate compared to how it might have been a few years ago.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You're talking about, maxing out your Roth IRA. I'm sitting over here making notes. It's like, okay, or do you have an HSA? Can you max the Roth IRA? Do you have enough in an emergency fund? Do you have debt that you can pay down? Do you have college that you need to be talking about funding? But here, or I think you says two individuals talking to one.
It was one individual talking to a young married couple. Like they were probably mid-20s, early mid-20s.
So, it's kind of funny because I do the same thing. I'm not going to lie. Like if I hear somebody talking about finances or stocks or planning, my ears perk up. And I'm for sure listening to you. I'm not going to try to pretend I'm not. I'm trying not to eavesdrop. No, I am. I'm
not going to butt into the conversation. But sometimes it takes everything in you not to be like, ooh, I don't know about that one, guys. Maybe we need to start a bit simpler.
Here's my business card. Call me when you're done talking.
Right.
There. So anyway, Luann, did we talk about this at the beginning of the show? We had internet problems at our building today.
Oh, I did not hear this.
So my sons work with us in the business. Christian is an advisor in our Huntsville office. And Caleb, his twin, works kind of behind the scenes with IT. And, he does a lot of digital stuff for us on the back end. And he's not a front-facing kind of person. He's much more shy. But I like to say he's probably the smartest kid in our family. But so I wake up this morning and Caleb and I get up early and I'm like, hey, is the internet working at the office? He said, no, it's not. And I said, well, shoot, I'm going to just go grab all of the radio equipment And Graham and I currently are in an undisclosed location. So Graham said this earlier. There have been times where we've kind of poked fun at the people in the garage with the tinfoil hats and stuff. That's us today.
That's you today.
And the one Shure microphone. And
Yeah.
us in a, an undisclosed location in a small room.
Yeah. When Graham arrived, I was like, is anybody following you? Get in quick. And I shut the door. And we literally have, this is no joke, right? When you're listening, this is no joke. We are actually at my house recording in my son, his bedroom. He doesn't live here anymore. Christian, the advisor I was talking about.
Yeah.
And we have a picnic table, one of those fold-out picnic tables.
That's what
with a blanket over top of it so that it looks nice, because that picnic table is actually my painting table.
Oh,
it's
my
actually
goodness.
what we paint, trim, and things on when we do house
mess.
projects.
Oh, no.
Right. So we have all the radio equipment. It looks really cool. It's got a nice velvety look. And we are sitting in kitchen chairs at this
classy
recording.
Very
so
classy.
There's your visual for the weekend. That's what you're listening to.
I'm picturing those foil caps is what I'm picturing most of all.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right, let's
nerd alert. No.
Yeah, pretty much.
Aww.
So let's roll into the Fed minutes this week. So,
okay, yeah.
All right, so there's been a lot of federal government talk this year, obviously with reductions and DRP and VERA, VSIP, and now we're hearing rumors of reduction in force, or RIF, as the federal employees know it. And there was a time where I think as a federal employee, you really didn't have to worry about this kind of stuff. I mean, you might hear of the VERA, the DRP, the Deferred Resignation Program. You really didn't hear of because it didn't exist. And so all you heard of was VERA and VSIP, maybe. And you very seldom heard about layoffs. And the federal government is the largest employer in the United States, employs over 1 million people, or it did at one point. And now we're talking about, okay, if there's not enough organization reduction force, basically, or employees take the DRP or VERAs or VSIPs, now they're talking about a RIF. And there was a district judge in California that blocked Trump's plan for layoffs and government reorganization. So what we are reading is that, according to a few sources, internally, these aren't my sources, these are the article sources from geoexec.com, that there are several people kind of familiar with the situation, that they are prepared to kind of move forward with some layoffs in the future if this injunction gets lifted. So that could be kind of bad news for people who did not take DRP1 or DRP2. I've talked to several people, actually. We have a lot of federal government employees that come in to see us. And I think with DRP1, they were afraid. It was is this real? And if I take this, are they really going to pay me? And I don't know. So the way I describe it is, you had a bunch of guinea pigs who took DRP1. And the people that didn't take it were kind of looking, and they were texting and calling and talking to the DRP1 guinea pigs. And then they were like, yeah, it's working. I'm getting paid. And I'm literally on extended paid vacation until the end of the year, or through September the 30th. And then DRP2 comes out, and they had a much larger response to DRP2, because the DRP2 people were talking to the guinea pigs, and they're like, okay, it works. We're gonna take it. So now there's been some VSIPs offered, and it looks like not enough people have taken it, and it could lead to reduction in force in some areas. And so I want to talk about the TSP here for a second as we kind of move on from the layoffs, because I don't want to kind of invoke fear or anything, but it just looks like it may be headed that direction. So at the market close on June the 27th, the Life Cycle 2025 fund will be eliminated. So when this happens, your funds will automatically be merged into the L Income Fund. And you should, and I have quotations here, you should receive communications regarding this change. But just be aware, right around the end of June, end of the day on the 27th, the Life Cycle 2025 fund will be retired, and you will be merged into the L Income Fund. This is important to know because, one, it's going to happen automatically. And two, you're going to be moved to a much more conservative fund that's going to consist of primarily G and F, and that will affect your return profile in the short run and in the long run. So you want to pay attention to that. And then just kind of something to talk about here regarding funds on June 30th. a new fund, the L2075, will be launched. And when I read this, to talk about 2075, that's a long time away. I mean, we're talking 50 years at this point. So when I was actually writing my notes out, I was like 2075. And it just, I don't know, Graham, if it feels weird to you, but it feels really weird to me to say 2075.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good ways out. It almost feels a little premature for them to launch that, because no one, I mean, if you were anticipating, an average retirement date of 65, are there even people in the work? Well, I guess there would be some, but yeah, there.
Well, I was kind of wondering if it was designed for the unborn grandkids or something like that. But maybe. the notes that I read said it was designed for individuals who were born after 2009.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're not even 18 yet.
No.
They're not getting there till 2027.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if you're graduate, it's, I guess, maybe to entice a 16-year-old to say, hey, why don't you come work for the federal government in 2 years?
That's right.
You just got your driver's license. Let's
sign up.
Yeah.
Let's go. All right. Last thing we'll talk about on Fed Minutes here is in-plan Roth conversions beginning January 2026. Active employees, separated employees or participants, and spousal beneficiaries will be able to do in-plan Roth conversions inside of the TSP. Now, this is unusual. A lot of 401k plans, you can't really do this. Normally, you're doing Roth conversions on the outside. So I've had a lot of people come to me and say, hey, Chris, now we can do Roth conversions inside the TSP. And here's the deal. You absolutely can, but you must pay the taxes with outside sources. So most of the Roth conversions that we work on, most of our clients elect to withhold the tax from the conversion. So let me make an example here. Let's say you want to convert $50,000 and you want to gross up and withhold the taxes on the conversion. So you might gross up and take $75,000, 25 of which will go to pay the federal and state tax if you're in the state of Alabama, and then your net conversion will be $50,000. Well, with the TSP, you cannot do that. You cannot withhold taxes from the in-plan conversion. So Graham said before the show, I started laughing. I was like, you got to say that on air. But what did you tell me when I was explaining and we were discussing this?
Oh, I think I used the word that it's somewhat of a nothing burger, in my opinion, just because of the fact that typically when I've seen a few scenarios with smaller conversions, but if you're going to do larger conversions, usually you want to withhold some portion of the taxes rather than paying it all in cash. Because quite frankly, if you have a large IRA account, if you're going to convert a couple $100,000, that's usually more cash than you're going to have just sitting in your bank account for most people to go log on to, IRS direct pay and just send the IRS $75,000 out of your checking account. Most people, don't want to do that. So there might be a few people that do, especially if, for example, you're someone that, is a lower net worth individual, got, maybe 100, 200,000 in the TSP, and you're just going to do some small conversions. Yeah. I could see the usefulness there, but for the medium and large TSP balances, I think they would still be better served, to be rolling it out and doing it through IRAs.
Yeah. So basically, just to kind of recap that conversation, is the TSP will now allow it. So those of you who aren't fully tracking, it's taking your pre-tax money and paying the tax and converting it to tax-free Roth money. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what Roth conversions are, and yes, I mean, the large majority of money out there today that the baby boomers hold today, and even Gen X, the large majority of it is in retirement plans. So to Graham's point, it's not quite a nothing burger, but it's kind of that for a lot of people, because most people have all their money in retirement funds and they're not sitting on $200,000 and $300,000 in additional cash. Even if you have $50,000 and the conversion costs you $25,000, you're going to take $25,000 out of your emergency fund to pay that tax, and now you're down to $25,000 in your emergency fund. And if you're retired, you're probably not replenishing that emergency fund at the same rate that you were when you were working. So it is important for you to know that option exists, but I don't think it is quite as exciting as if you're converting from an IRA. So there's some advantages there. Moving into market updates here. So S&P on the year up 2.7, the Dow's up 0.23, NASDAQ up 1.84, and bonds are up 0.69% on the year. So this is the first time in a while that we've had all 4 of these major indices in positive territory. So that's a great thing. I also saw a headline where Trump says he's not getting rid of Tesla or Starlink at the White House, and Tesla stock surged over 5%.
Hey,
so
great.
just a quick comment on this. And I don't want to get political, but man, what a fight between Trump and Elon.
It was like in a matter of days, they left on good terms, and 4 days later, bam.
Yeah. So I have an executive assistant that works with me. She's also a certified financial planner. So she follows this market stuff as well. And she sent me a text and she was like, wow, I didn't have that on my bingo card this year. And I was like, I didn't either. I didn't see this coming.
No.
And they were just going at it on
It's
X,
so ridiculous.
Formerly Twitter. But so here's the deal. Words matter. So Trump says he's not getting rid of Tesla or Starlink. The Tesla stock surges over 5%. Words matter. I've never seen a presidential candidate, I've never seen a president with his lips move the market like Trump moves the market.
Right.
With his lips.
Yeah.
Or at least I don't remember it. I'm sure somebody's going to correct me on that. But
yeah, well, I mean, I think it in previous times, maybe prior to 15 years ago, it's also been a bit harder to do that because now, with something like Twitter out there, you got the 140 characters and you can send out tweets to the world whenever. And it does make the speed of information a lot quicker.
True.
You don't have to call a national press conference and then people sit down at their TVs at 7:30 at night, and get their soap operas interrupted. For a presidential message, you can kind of get information out and policy changes out sort of whenever. So I think it is. I'll be curious to see if it's, to be honest, I kind of hope it's not just the new normal for every presidency, because I know that the volatility, is certainly, it can be up days and it can be down days when, people are reacting that fast. But it definitely is, probably kind of a new reality to some extent.
Oh, yeah. I would agree. It's only going to get worse, in my opinion, because we all, at the younger generation, learning and knows how to use technology, better than, say the older generation. And I would put myself in that category. I mean, my son is amazing with technology and some of the things he's able to do with AI and stuff is crazy. But yeah, Graham, to your point, I actually think this will become the new norm, especially with the last presidential race, in my opinion, being somewhat off of podcasting.
Right. Yeah.
And the social media and the podcasting, we've seen more and more people go and gravitate towards that. So I think the speed of information, to your point, Graham, is going to create somewhat of a new norm here. So I know we've got some topics, Luann. I'm done with all my market update stuff this week. I know you got some stuff we want to get into, so I'm ready when you are.
Speaking of the markets, my goodness, we've seen a lot of up and down, even inflation. We've seen rising prices again. So it just seems like planning for retirement can feel like an endurance test. So, the question is your plan going to stand up to all the stress? So I thought we'd kind of break down the biggest stressors that you guys see on a retirement plan, and you give us some actionable steps to help us stay on track. So tell us what would be some of the biggest stressors people need to be aware of, Chris.
Yeah. So one of the things you just said, though, is can your retirement plan stand up to the stress? So the first question I think you have to ask yourself if you're listening to the show is do you have a plan? And what is your retirement plan look like? What have all of the things, what have you thought about? What have you gone through? I know that in our planning process touches on up to 25 different areas of a retirement plan. So if you're listening to the show and you're a do-it-yourselfer and you can tell me that you've personally touched 25 different areas of your family's retirement plan, then I would have a dark chocolate bar at the office waiting on you. So that's the first thing. Do you have a retirement plan? And I think there's several things that can really impact a retirement plan. Number one, the market swings that we were just talking about can have an impact on your returns and how you're pulling money out. You mentioned inflation. It's under control, kinda. And there's people out there yelling at me right now when I say that. But we've seen the year over year number come down. And I know that it's come down because my $12 hamburger that we always talk about is not $24. It's now, $13. So I know the speed in which the prices have gone up has kind of slowed down. And then the economic conditions and the slowdowns in the job market. So just as a side note, I really think the feds are really watching the unemployment numbers right now, as well as the inflationary numbers relative to tariffs and such. And that's why we haven't seen a rate cut right now. But economic slowdowns is another thing that could impact a retirement plan, especially if you retire and at the wrong time, which would be right when you retire or right before you retire, that we slip off into a recession. And when that happens, that can be for some people catastrophic. It can also be psychologically catastrophic because it's bad enough when you're about to slip off into retirement and you're going to stop the faucet of income. And then all of a sudden, now you have a recession to deal with when you don't have a paycheck coming in anymore. And now you got to pull out of your investment. So psychologically, it can be bad as well.
Awesome. Okay. So there you go. Things we have to look out for. And we're going to get into all of these now, kind of take them one at a time. So Graham, let's take market swings. They can feel overwhelming. How can retirees or those coming up on retirement handle that?
I think that going back to what Chris was talking about a second ago, I think feeling confident in your plan and in your strategy going into retirement is one of the best ways to deal with those market swings, because they will happen. There's no getting around that. I mean, if you go through any 20, 30 year period of time, even if, the market was more than likely up, it was definitely up if we're looking at a period that big. But within that, there are smaller chunks of time where there was more volatility. There are wars, there are recessions, and there are geopolitical events. All these things.
There are tweets.
Yes.
Yeah, there are tweets. That's a new one, but what we were talking about. So all of those things can create volatility. And ultimately, you have to be able to feel confident that, the amount of income that you need to live on, that you're going to be able to withdraw that from your assets. If you feel confident in that, if you feel confident income-wise, I think you're going to feel confident in different market conditions, regardless of if your portfolio is a little bit down, or a little bit up. And I also think, as we've talked about many times, not just looking at it all the time, not following all of this super closely, because, no matter which side of the political spectrum you fall on, I think if you, follow everything going on in the world on a very regular basis, you will probably think everything's, going to hell in a handbasket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, there are some things that are not great. The world is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that, people can tend to overly sensationalize certain things and just get themselves into kind of a rut that makes even small market swings feel a lot bigger, feel a lot more of a stressor, just because you're so engulfed in all of it.
Yeah, I do agree with that, Graham. The looking at it all the time just feeds into that anxiety. And we're kind of like, just trust your plan, trust your process. Like, that's what we're here for. We're here to guide you. We're here to talk with you. We're here to meet with you several times a year to make sure that you're comfortable with what you're doing in retirement. We do encourage people, go out and play, plan, retire, play. That's kind of our motto. If you'd like to set up a discovery session with us, you can call us at 256-937-2010. Again, the number is 256-937-2010. If you're catching this episode on the way to church, you're catching the 30-minute episode, and you can hop out to Apple Podcast or Spotify, those platforms. You can catch the whole show, and I hope everybody's enjoying the show so far. This is the first half of the show.
Are questions about your financial future, such as, have I saved enough? Or will my retirement last? Keeping you up at night? Text VISIT to 256-937-2010. That's text VISIT to 256-937-2010 and schedule your consultation today.
quarters, just 25 cents. That's hardly anything, right? But Chris Wallace and his team at WG Financial see quarters a little differently. A quarter is a lot when it's a quarter of your retirement savings. Now, do you want to pay 25% or more in taxes during your retirement? Well, Chris can create a plan to help address that. Now, if the only time you think about taxes is when you file them, you don't have a tax strategy. But it's not too late to get one with the help from Chris Wallace. So act now to make sure you're not paying a quarter, dime, or even a penny more than you should. Call Chris Wallace and his team at WG Financial at 256-937-2010 to schedule your personalized tax strategy session. A quarter saved is a quarter earned. Call 256-937-2010 now. That's 256-937-2010. Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Firm may not give tax advice.
If lingering doubts like, have I saved enough? Or will my retirement funds endure? Are on your mind, it's time to consult with Chris Wallace. Text VISIT to 256-937-2010. That's 256-937-2010 to book your appointment and get the answers you need.
All right. We thank you so much for joining us today. The Rite Retirement Show is what you've tuned into. And I'm Lou Ann Fulmer here with Chris Wallace, president at WG Financial Group, certified financial planner, financial advisor there. Graham Bauer also joining us, certified financial planner, enrolled agent, and financial advisor at the firm. And so excited to have you today. And we're getting a lot of good stuff talked about and brought out in the open. And if you are just joining us, we're talking about major stressors on retirement plans. So real quick, I want to get back to inflation as a big concern, Chris. We just touched on it a little bit ago. You want to go a little bit deeper? What would be the best way to help protect retirement income from rising costs?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. We're doing a little bit of talk on inflation today. I mean, we typically do every show, for the most part. But I was meeting with a recently widowed client just this past week, actually yesterday. And she came in the office. Husband was not doing well, and then actually took a real quick turn for the worse. So I hadn't seen her in a couple of months. And so after we walked through everything, kind of what to do, helped her with understanding what to do with these claim forms. One of the things she said to me when she left or was leaving, she looked at me and had that real concerned look in her face. And she said, when is inflation going to come down? And I just kind of paused for a second. And I said, the year over year number has come down. We mentioned that just a few minutes ago. But I said, the really bad thing about inflation is the permanent elevation in price. Mm-hmm. So here, this young lady, I'll call her, is recently widowed, and she's worried about prices and when are they going to come down. And I always talk about the $12 hamburger. Now it's 13, I guess I said, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to come down. And I heard Trump saying on, I don't know, some clip I saw somewhere on social media about the price of eggs coming down. He's like, you said you used to hit me about eggs, and now the price of eggs have come down. Here's the reality. Like all of the groceries in general, they're way up in price relative to 2020, and they're not coming back down. And that's what we have to remember as consumers out there today is those things are expensive. We have to figure out ways to generate more revenue in order to be able to afford some of the things that are just plainly more expensive, and they're not going to come down. But the rate in which they would continue to escalate has slowed down somewhat relative to the past couple of years. So I kind of felt really sorry for her. And I didn't want to tell her that, well, I did kind of tell her. I said, sometimes our president says a lot and maybe it's not communicated clearly to you. So I want to make sure that I communicate that. So, if you're concerned about inflation in retirement, it's, you have some inflation adjusted pieces of income. So let's just take Social Security because most everybody's going to have that. So it is COLA adjusted, cost of living adjusted. But the problem with Social Security is it's not going to keep up with the normal pace of inflation in a lot of cases, but it is COLA adjusted. So our methodology here at the office is to help you make a good decision with Social Security because we want that income to be as strong as possible because we know it's going to go up somewhat. It may not keep up entirely with inflation, but it goes up. And the same thing for federal government employees or military individuals who served our great country. They also have the COLA adjustments on their pensions as well. So it's important to make good decisions there. You want to make sure your investments are invested in a way that gives you the ability to support your retirement plan from a risk perspective, but also we want them to grow over time. And then again, maybe possibly building in some additional income streams, if you don't have enough what we call guaranteed income. So not everybody is as fortunate to have pension plans.
Mm-hmm.
So some people just have Social Security and their investments. So sometimes it is helpful in that case to make sure that they're setting up additional income streams. And then lastly, once you have a plan in place, remember I said our planning process touches on about 25 different little areas of your retirement plan, is to revisit that on an annual basis at least to really understand if there's any adjustments, modifications that need to be made. We are kind of the mindset where once your plan's in place, you really don't have to make what we would call radical adjustments. We would say there might be some mild adjustments that we would need to make, but by and large, the plan should, I don't want to call it like a self-driving car. We talked about Tesla on the show so far, so I don't want to say everybody's plan should be self-driving, but we shouldn't have to make any radical changes to it long term.
I just want to add one thing to what you said, what you were talking about before with inflation, which you kind of hit on, but I think one big misunderstanding of, the Federal Reserve maybe among a lot of people is that their goal is to, get prices down or, make things cheaper, where, really their main goal is price stabilization. Like you were saying, interest rate, inflation, unemployment, stabilization, getting us to a point where we can be stable, where there can be continued growth and can kind of weather the good and the bad times. But, I was recently in Europe and we went to a few different countries over the span of a couple weeks. And it was just kind of a reminder. We were not even in, the notoriously expensive areas like Switzerland or some of those other countries. And, things are expensive there too. The grocery stores, we went into a few grocery stores, looked around at the price of a couple different things. Going to restaurants, a lot of it's pretty comparable. And, people are frustrated there too about elevated prices. So it really isn't a U.S. specific issue. It's basically a worldwide issue. And obviously that doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything about it. But, it is the unfortunate reality that, it is something that's really kind of a consequence of, how much money printing the entire world did around
exactly,
COVID.
100%.
And I think it's going to be a long time before we don't feel any of the effects of it. But it is still a good sign that it's not rapidly increasing like it was before.
Yeah.
2% might not sound great, or 2.1%. I forget what the last one was, but it is much better than 7%.
Yeah, it is. And you're right, Graham. I mean, it is a worldwide problem. And the world decided to just go and print tons of money and just continue and to continue doing that. And people need to understand. I mean, if you're younger and listening to this show, if you're older and listening to this show, government spending is inflationary. So it is imperative that Congress rein in the spending. And I think us as voters, both sides, doesn't matter what side, us as voters get out there and do our job to, elect the officials that are going to try to rein in the spending. Because again, government spending is inflationary. It drives the money supply up. And when that happens, you can start to see inflation kind of taking off a little bit. So good points there, Graham.
Very good. Good points, all of you. Now, we're talking about financial stressors, the biggest ones that retirees should be thinking about. The other one is the economic downturns. You guys just mentioned COVID, things like that. How can retirees feel financially steady even during the rough times? How do you guys work with them on that?
Yeah. So as far as economic downturns, this is what I talked about earlier. The worst time that this can happen is kind of towards the tail end of your working career or after you're recently retired. And the reason why I think it's bad for two reasons. It's bad for your money because depending on how you're invested, you may put yourself at risk where you're losing a lot of money late in your working career, which typically will mean, hey, you got to work a little bit longer. Or it could be right after you retire and you're now pulling out of that nest egg, which feels unusual to you. and kind of out of character. So you're pulling out of it. Nope, now we've lost a lot of money in our portfolio, and it's got to support us through the rest of our retirement. So it can be bad for your money, but it can also be bad for your psychology as well, because we know that money's emotional to people. And especially when you retire and you turn off the faucet of income, and now all of a sudden you're pulling out of the portfolio, market drops. Again, A, it's bad for your money. B, it's also bad for your psychology as well. So one of the things that we would say is maintain, you may even want to look at a bucket strategy. And what I mean by that is having cash available or a safer type investment available that you could pull funds from during a downturn to kind of, I call it kind of weathering the storm a little bit. Because if this happens early in retirement, it's going to cause you not to be able to get into what we call your retirement rhythm. And the retirement rhythm is getting into the normal everyday life in retirement, doing your day in, day out routine, living on the budget you've set, living off the money you've saved, but also feeling comfortable doing that. That's all part of that retirement rhythm. So maintaining a bucket, so to speak, of money that is available, low volatility to really help you weather that storm. The other thing you can do is build consistent income sources. So if you only have Social Security as an income stream and you're having to reach in and pull out of the IRA or the 401k, you may consider building some additional reliable income sources that will in turn literally give you a longer time horizon with your investments. So one option, and I'm not promoting this right now on the air, but I'm just going to bring it up because if you don't have a pension, you can look at dividends, you can look at other instruments. But if you don't have a pension, maybe it might benefit you if you set up an income annuity that would kind of function like a pension. Now, some people say, "Oh, I don't want an annuity." That's fine. You don't have to do an annuity, but just kind of hear me out here. You have Social Security, and now you have this income, which out of an annuity, which again, just like a pension. And let's say that the annuity and the Social Security is covering all of your necessary living expenses. Now you don't need your investments. So what should that do? Well, that should make you feel like you're 40 again in terms of your investments because you don't need them right now. So the income has allowed you to pay the bills, which in turn has allowed you to have a longer term outlook on your investment. So when you get into retirement, I do think when you're building a plan, you have to consider all different types of tools when you're building out a retirement plan. So those are just kind of some thoughts there just to kind of help you mentally, because this is going to happen to a lot of people out there listening. It will happen. When you retire, we're going to go through downturns. You're probably going to see, I would say, 3 to 4 recessions during a normal retirement. So you need to be prepared for this, and you should build a plan that will help you mentally, both financially and mentally, weather the storm that's going to happen.
Recently I've seen, I guess, about 2 people that have come in and they've had both probably, I don't remember who was higher, but the most retirement income just from guaranteed sources that I've ever seen, just with pensions and Social Security combined, deferring everything and, literally in the multiple 6 figures.
Really?
And when you talk to people in that situation, they're usually not very worried about how they're going to pay their bills, or even if there's a small market downturn. Not saying that means everyone needs to have $200,000 a year of guaranteed income, because that's just not feasible for most people. But just seeing people in those scenarios, there's not as much of a transition, at least financially, from working to retiring, because for a lot of them, they kind of ended up transitioning with a similar amount of income as they had before. So I do think it frees you up a lot, and it definitely frees you up to, just like you said, not be so worried about what's going on with your portfolio, and potentially even allows you to chase a little bit more return, saying,
right,
hey,
right.
I don't really need all of this money right now to live on. Maybe I'm investing this more as an inheritance. Maybe there's some bigger goal that I want to fund in 10 or 15 or 20 years, or want to have this available for long-term care or something like that. So one thing that I've been really honing in on recently for the clients that I work with that, especially that are, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years into retirement, is just really saying, if they're not taking any withdrawals off of their portfolio at all, just kind of saying, hey, you've made it a decent way into retirement so far. If you had another $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 a month coming in, would you spend it? Are there things that you feel like you're not doing right now that you would like to do? And, I've gotten a few no's to that. There are a few people that say, no, actually, our income is plenty. We don't feel like we ever have to pinch a penny. But then there are definitely also people who say, actually another $1,000 a month would be great. There's, I heard someone say the other day, the listener of the show as well, they're saying, I have a lot of stuff in my Amazon cart, so I think I could use a little bit more extra income.
You sure my daughter's not been in that house?
Yeah, right.
You sure she's not been in that account?
Yeah. So, I think those types of things, they do make a difference though, just in how you feel. And once you've kind of, made it a ways into retirement where you've gotten into that rhythm, say, hey, I don't have to be quite as worried about, a slight economic downturn right now. I'm a little bit more conservative. Maybe I should be spending a little bit more and doing a couple extra things. Yeah,
Graham, you actually bring up something really important here. As I was walking through that, you kind of drove it home a little bit better than I was trying to say it. The people that come into the office that have a significant guaranteed income, you're right. The conversations are different with them. One, they're not really worried about when they can retire. They're not really worried about running out of money. The conversations are different. It's more geared towards you can spend more, as you noted, but then also some additional investment tax planning, I think, is one of the things that we typically will kind of gear our conversations towards, because we're, through our planning process that we look at things through the Rite retirement process. The income's strong. And yeah, just like I said before, when you have that type of income coming in, you don't need the investments. And to your point, Graham, you can chase a little bit more return if you want to do that. Just think about right now, when you were like 35 or 40, like I said a few minutes ago, did you worry about your 401k? No, you really didn't. Actually, 20, 25 years ago, you didn't have social media the way like we have now. And, the news wasn't all in your face, and, you just didn't worry. So the income really allows you, this is why it's like the foundation of your retirement is your retirement income. It really allows you to do some different things if your income is actually stronger. So good discussion there for sure.
Very good. All right. So, we talk about putting your retirement plan to the test. Okay. Do you guys do some type of a stress test? And tell us what that means, Chris.
Yeah, we do actually. So we'll look at the investments. So say somebody comes in, they're a radio listener, maybe they're a TV listener, maybe they're a podcast listener, and they call in, they do an appointment with us. We are going to look at the investments, and we're going to stress test them. We're going to investigate and ask questions centered around risk tolerance and risk capacity. But not only just with the investments, we actually stress test the plan. We use a software that allows us to run a Monte Carlo. We work with a ton of engineers in the Huntsville, Alabama area. And, through that Monte Carlo, it kind of gives us some randomized trials that the Monte Carlo is running, runs 1,000 different trials, basically retires you. We call it retires you 1,000 different times. But then we also run what's called like a recession Monte Carlo. And internally, we call it bear market Monte Carlo. And what it does is it kind of simulates your investments if you lose a certain amount, especially early, the first year into retirement. And what that does is that gives us as advisors a lot greater confidence in your long-term success. So we can confidently say, with the way that we run the profile, your Monte Carlo looks good. And hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, if you have a recession and lose 22% the first year that you retire, you're still good because our math models have kind of told us so. So that's how we're doing it. The other things that we can do in our software is we can run things that you might be worried about. So some people are worried about long-term care. Some people are worried about rising inflation. Some people are worried about Social Security cuts. If you're really afraid of those types of things, then we can run those types of scenarios as well. We have the ability to run a wide range of scenarios. And the way that I kind of explain it to clients is when we work with people, we as advisors, especially me as the business owner, I have to feel good about what I'm doing. I have to feel, okay, are my numbers accurate? Because I'm not one of these people that can lay down and go to sleep at night if I know that I didn't do a thorough job internally with my team to make sure that the family was going to be okay. So we're not, when we're running these plans, we're not hoping, we're not running them on hopium. Hopium's not a plan. It is not a plan. We hope for the best, but we kind of gear the plan more towards the worst case scenario. And I always say it this way. The worst case scenario is the world blows up, and guess what? We're all on that. We're all on that sinking ship, right?
Yeah.
But what we do is we hope for the best, but we gear the plan towards a little bit more worst case scenarios, so that if market returns are lower, or if Social Security COLA is lower than historical, then we still know the family's going to be okay. So we're kind of building in, I don't want to call them complete safety nets, but we're building in some caution in the plan.
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. So are there any other conditions that you are testing in that stress test, Graham, that other than what Chris mentioned?
I mean, I think the once you get to the end of the stress tests, a lot of times, as we were talking about before, the second question becomes, hey, well, if I'm okay, if, in the normal scenario, if I'm okay, if returns don't keep up as well, if I'm okay, if there's a recession year one, well, then that's all great news. How much can I spend at that point? And Chris touched on that a little bit, but, I think that becomes the second important question of, okay, so if we know that it's not, the current scenario is not a problem, we're not really showing, a concerning amount of failures, we have a good score on all of these, then our question, and our tests really turn to, okay, how far can we push it? How much can we get in income? So, this client can go out and, go out and play, go out and do things, make memories with their family. And
Did you just say M&M money? Is that what you're alluding to? M&M money?
I was, yeah. A little,
making memories money.
Making memories money.
Yeah, and all of that is super, super important. So, I mean, some people like to be more thorough than others. As far as how many different scenarios they want to see, we've sat down with certain people who are like, well, try it with this. Well, what if I, move to this state? And what if I do this? And what if I do that? And what if I spend this much for this many years and then this much for that many years? So the possibilities really can be, somewhat endless. But, ultimately, I think that for most people, just being able to know that, or, at least see good data that, the amount that they've saved relative to how much they're going to need to live on, pretty much regardless of if their investments are, keeping up with historical averages or not, or if there's a recession, that they're still going to be able to maintain their lifestyle.
Yeah, I think the other thing I wanted to mention here, Graham, I don't know if you've ever had someone tell you before, but I've had this happen on a number of occasions where someone they've worked with another advisor and they say, oh, it's so hard to get money out of them, meaning the advisor's not wanting them to spend money. And I can't understand that. So you hear at the beginning of the show, a lot of people are worried about running out of money, but what we see is people not spending enough of their money. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that wake up at age 80 and they're going to say, man, we should have spent more money. You'll be sitting out on your front porch. You won't quite be able to move the same at 80 as you were able to move at 60. And you're going to look over at your spouse and you're going to say, you know what, honey, we should have actually spent more money. We should have went out. We should have traveled. We should have went out and played a little bit more. And that's what we encourage at the office, as long as the plan works. And one of the things that we do, I feel like it's a little bit different and maybe a little bit more thorough, is that we're using a couple different planning softwares. So we're using one that's more Monte Carlo based, and then we're using one that's kind of income driven. So not only are we looking at the survivability of the plan and the probability of you making it all the way through retirement without running out of money, we're also looking at, okay, if you really wanted to spend more in the first part of your retirement, how much could you spend? Because that's a common question I think that I've received, Graham, probably as well, is, well, if my budget is, $8,000 a month that I want to spend, what can I spend? Can I get away with 10? Can I get away with 11? Knowing that later in retirement, I can reduce that. And I probably will reduce that. Like when you hit your 80s and you tend to slow down a little bit. So those are the type of things when we work with a family, we're looking at multiple different angles. Here again, we have to, as advisors, when we give you that proverbial green light, it's basically we have to feel comfortable also. And we do that by looking at multiple angles of the retirement plan to make sure you're good.
So what would you recommend then for anybody listening? They're not sure their plan can handle major stress. What would you tell them?
Well, one of the things that if you don't know that, you should really seek advice. And I always say it this way, Luann, whether it's us, I mean, I think we do a great job, but we're not the right fit for everybody, and that's okay. People get along with various people, but for various reasons. But what we want families to do, individuals and families out there today, is if you're not sure, then seek guidance, seek advice from a professional. Both Graham and I are certified financial planners, and I think the technical way that we're supposed to say it, we refer to ourselves as certified financial planner professionals. So that means we've been through a lot of different training. We've had to pass some tests. We've been doing this a little while. I know I'm in my nearly 20th year at this point. I have a lot of gray hair. Matter of fact, my receptionist called me the big dog at the office yesterday in our meeting, and I was thinking, well, that's better than the old dog.
I like that. Yeah, big dog's good. Big
dog's better than old dog. But there's, we would encourage the listener that's worried about that to go sit down with somebody and approach the meeting with an open mind. And we would also say, talk to a few people. That way you have a good feel for what's out there. I know that people that come in to see us personally, Graham, they've been listening for years at this point. I think you're going on year 3 with us on the air, roughly.
Ooh, yeah, 2 or 3 at this point.
Yeah.
It's been a little while.
Yeah, Luann and I, we've been on the air.
Wow.
We are actually the only radio show. I know you probably know this, Graham, the only radio show in Huntsville that has 2 certified financial planners on the air, giving advice and
very cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. We actually have 4 on staff. We have 4 CFPs on staff.
That's so exciting.
So I'll kind of run through that real quick as we get to wrap up the show. We use the Rite retirement process, retirement income, investment, taxes, estate planning. Estate and legacy planning is how we look at it. And we touch on about 25 different points through that process to really just make sure that, one, a family's going to be okay. But we also want to make sure that we're doing things efficiently. So we have a lot of engineers in Huntsville, so we understand the efficiency of things is really important. So again, we have 4 CFPs on staff. One of those is my executive assistant. And then we have a service advisor or 2 service advisors and Graham. Graham's actually a lead advisor at the office. So he's a CFP. And then we have another service advisor that's a CFP. My son is actually going through the process. So there's a process, there's books and there's studying and there's tests. And our goal is to have a firm that really consists of CFPs. So anybody that comes in or sits down with one of our staff members, or we like to call them team members, that they'll have the certified financial planner designation. So our goal is to eventually have all CFPs on staff. And our training process internally, Graham, as you know, is rigorous because Graham helped build some of the training out. So you actually, if you come to work here, internally, you must pass a test. And it's wild to receive the feedback from our team of advisors on the questions that they have to go through. And then they're required to sit in meetings and all of that. So we run a pretty cool shop at the office, and I'm proud of my team. And we've grown quite a bit. And if you'd like to set up a discovery session, give us a call, 256-937-2010. I hope everybody's enjoyed the show. I hope everybody has an awesome and blessed week. And remember to serve every person in every situation with a servant heart.
Please remember that converting an employer plan account to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. Increased taxable income from the Roth IRA conversion may have several consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.
Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business WG Insurance Services. WG Financial Group is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by WG Insurance Services are not subject to investment advisory requirements. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. WG Financial is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial. This radio show is a paid placement.